Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1000 to 2000 elo in chess.com rapid games, where I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I possibly can for your education and entertainment. And today, my opponent plays a Pirc Defense, or a Piers, however you want to pronounce it. I actually had a Pirc in a tournament, a big tournament I played recently, and I basically like to play it in a Vienna fashion. I don't like to do what my opponent wants, and my opponent wants me to take a big center, and he wants to fight back with moves like c5, and that's all well and good. But I'm going to play this kind of like a mix of a Vienna and an a3 Sicilian, known as the Mengarini Sicilian, because I want to avoid the mainline theory and I want to play into a system that I am familiar with. So we are going to play f4. My opponent goes e6, so we're going to drop the bishop back because I don't want d5 to come with tempo on my bishop. I want to meet d5 with e5 and kick this knight. And I'm just going to develop normally. I may push h4, probably not. I'm going to throw a4 in to stop b5 and also give my bishop a hidey hole on the a2 square. So you can see, if you've watched my a3 Sicilian playlist, which I think because of the way the game's transformed, I think I will link below and have this game as part of that playlist, because other than the pawn being on a4 rather than a3, the position is pretty damn normal for an a3 Sicilian. And what I've effectively done is taken my opponent from a Pirc defense, right, which he starts the game off with, and I transform it into a Sicilian, into a position I'm more comfortable with, which I think is a very useful skill to have. Okay, so my opponent goes queen b6. My opponent goes queen b6. What's the idea? Well, he wants to go c4 with check and win my bishop. Right, that much is obvious. I could play the move a5, which means on c4 I could, of course, take the queen. However, the queen retreats, and then knight to c6 probably comes, and I'm not really sure how I defend this pawn. If I go a5, queen c7, knight to a4, trying to go knight to b6, then I probably just lose the pawn. So I think it's easier just to go king to h1 in this position. If I'd have gone bishop to e3, I was concerned about knight to g4, harassing my bishop, and I don't really want to give the bishop away because it will become an important attacking piece if we can pull this attack off, most likely. So, okay, how am I going to continue here? Well, again, if my opponent goes d5, I'm going to play e5, most likely, unless I can just win a pawn. I think I like the look of the move knight to e2, which is a very thematic idea in these positions. Now, why is knight e2 a thematic idea? Well, the point is to transfer the knight to the g3 square, because it should be pretty obvious that our pieces are pointing towards the black king. Okay, my opponent goes knight a5. We will just retreat the bishop to a2. Like I said, a4 is useful not only to stop b5, but to give my bishop a hidey hole. Queen c7, a cryptic looking move, but I think it's obvious my opponent wants to play the move b5, which is fine. He can play b5 if he wants. We're going to... No, you have to be careful here, actually. I want to play the move c3, but I'm going to start with knight to g3, transferring the knight to the king side, because if I play the move c3 immediately, I think black has c4, which is annoying, because I'd love to advance d4 and take a big center, but then the e4 pawn would hang. So my opponent undermines the defense of e4. So I need to play knight to g3 first. My opponent does indeed play the move b5. The question is, do I take or do I not take? I honestly don't want to take. If I just play the move c3, if my opponent takes, I could just take back, and I keep the a file shut, which is probably good. Probably good. And I want to play f5 at some point. I may have to play knight to h4 to make that happen. But we're going to start with c3. Start with c3, because it's just a good move. If e5, which might be okay. It does open up my bishop. Okay, bishop to d7. So my opponent is threatening to take my a4 pawn. So maybe I should now take. Take. Then I can go knight to h4 and go for f5. Maybe. I think that works. I could allow my opponent to take, but it feels unnecessary. So I'm going to take. If he takes with a bishop, then I'm very happy. Okay, yeah, so he takes with the b pawn. Sorry, with the a pawn even. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I hope this is useful and entertaining. Yeah, let's go knight h4. I want to make f5 happen. And this knight is difficult to kick away, particularly because the queen has left this diagonal, which is normally the issue with knight to h4. Because typically, with the queen on d8, if you go knight h4, there is knight takes e4. And after you take back, there is queen takes h4. And you don't have a desperado. If the queen's on d8 and you go knight h4 and knight takes e4, you can't take on g6 because black will take on g3 with check first and then take your knight and you'll just be down a piece. So this is situational. But yeah, I think f5 makes a lot of sense. Trying to rip apart the black king side, which is, again, a very common idea. Black may try to strike with d5 and encourage me to play e5 so that I can't play f5. However, if d5, I think we just go f5 and everything gets ripped apart. This diagonal becomes incredibly weak. The dark squares around the king become incredibly weak. And it looks really, really promising. We also have potential ideas of like f5 take. And, okay, c4 is a move. It's a very interesting move, actually. If knight b3, if take, I lose my rook on a1. Oh, why did I do that? That's not what I meant to do. So that's very interesting. If take... Yeah, that doesn't really help me. I could play the move d4. However, knight b3 is a problem. Because I can't take it because my rook hangs. And if d4, knight b3, and I move my rook, my bishop hangs. That's a very interesting move from my opponent. I may have to play the move bishop to e3 so that I can take the knight because I'm defending the rook. And if takes, I'll just take back. That should be fine. If knight to c4. That's fine. If I go f5 straight away, knight b3... I don't think it works. It's too much. So yeah, bishop e3 looks forced. Very interesting counterplay from my opponent. If he wants, he could take on d3, but I think that only really helps us, to be honest. I think it only really helps us. Because... Okay, he does it. Okay. Well, alright, let's consider the options. We could play f5 anyway. We could ignore my opponent. However, knight c4, he attacks my bishop. And my bishop doesn't really have amazing squares, and b2 is also under attack. So I don't think I have time. If queen d3, knight to c4, threatening the b2 pawn. Bishop takes, pawn takes, queen c2. I'm still executing the move f5. So that should be fine. And b2 is protected. So yeah, let's take. Queen takes. Yeah, so I think I have to take this. I don't really want to give up my bishop, but I don't think I have a choice. Okay, takes on a1 first. That's fine. Let's take back. I have ideas of rook a7 now, which look quite tempting, aligning with the bishop. Now, I may even move away from my plan of f5. I might not even go for it anymore, because I may have better ideas. Because f5 also opens up the lines for my opponent's bishops, because he does have the bishop pair here. So it might actually be more useful for me to drop the knight back to f3 and try and play a bit more positionally and keep these bishops a bit locked out of the game. So, yeah, very interesting position now. f5, I don't really have the firepower anymore, I don't think. There's too many open lines in the center. Typically, when your opponent, so if we're black from this position, like let's consider it from the black side, if your opponent is trying to attack you on one side of the board, the best way to counter it typically is to try to open up the center. And my opponent has effectively done that by playing the move c4. Now, in this position, if he had just continued development, or let's say he brought the knight back to c6 instead of c4, let's say he played like knight c6, then the center remains closed and I can go for the move f5. Probably. But by playing c4 and ripping the center open, he makes it very difficult for me to do that. Okay, rook to b8. Alright. Alright. So, putting pressure on b2. We could play rook to a7, attacking the queen. The queen doesn't even have that many squares. Let's say queen to b6. Sorry, b6? c6. Putting pressure on e4. I'm not really sure what my rook's doing on a7 there. It looks a bit silly. So maybe knight to f3 is a better idea. Also, rook a7, queen c6. I have knight to d4 there. And the queen might actually be almost trapped. Might have to go back to c8, which looks good for me. So I think this makes a lot of sense. If d5, I will probably play e5, and if knight to g4, I'll drop my bishop back to g1 and keep my bishop on the diagonal. f5 doesn't really make any sense. Black can just ignore it. Black can just ignore it. Or he can take once and then ignore it. Of course, if takes and knight takes, that's a great win for me, but he's just not going to do that. So, okay, if I bring the knight back in queen b7, targeting b2, so knight f3, queen b7, is that a cause for concern? Rook a2 is probably forced. Queen b3. Take, rook takes. Well, I have knight d4 kicking the rook away. I don't really want to trade the queens, though. The value of rook to a7 is it stops the queen from going to b7, and after queen to c6, knight to f3, he does have queen to b5, however. So he still accesses the b file and puts pressure on b2. So I'm not sure I can stop that. Not sure I can stop it. So I'm going to go knight to f3. It just looks logical. Looks logical. And if queen b7... I suppose I just go rook a2. I don't want to play bishop c1. That looks too passive. E4 is currently defended enough as well, so that's fine. Yeah, e5 doesn't really make sense. I don't want to open up the position like that. I have to be aware of bishop c6 applying more pressure. Maybe I have to go knight d2 in those lines. But that should be okay. Should be okay. I was trying to think of ways to sacrifice the b2 pawn for counterplay, but I don't think we really have anything. Or do we? Wait, do we? Rook a7, queen b2, rook b2, e5, trying to remove the defender of the bishop. Take, knight g4, counter-attacking my bishop and the pawn. Don't think that's good enough. Although, I can deliver a check on a8. I can deliver a check on a8. How does black defend? He has to go bishop to f8, and then bishop to c5. If rook to b1 check, knight to g1. There is no knight to f2 because my bishop controls that square. That's super complicated, but it might work. Rook a7, queen b2, queen b2, rook b2, e5. What about if knight to g4 immediately, not taking first? Well, if check, bishop to f8. Check, bishop f8. Don't think I have enough. Bishop g1, because I don't have access to c5 because it's controlled. I'm threatening to take it technically, but oh, there's also ideas of knight f2. No, that doesn't work. I'll check with the engine after the game, but I don't think it works. I have to make some preparatory moves to do that. I think I have to play the move h3 to make that happen, maybe? Not sure. Okay, let's start with rook a2. Let's start with rook a2. Just defend the pawn, but I still have access to the a file. Okay, he goes for bishop to c6, which does remove some of my counterplay because I don't hit the bishop, so e5 doesn't come with the idea to remove the knight from the defense of the bishop. He's attacking e4, which I have to defend, probably with knight d2. I think I should probably play. I could consider knight to g5, trying to put pressure on f2 in conjunction with rook to a7, but there's no actual attack there. So I think knight to d2 is better. Also controls b3, which could be useful. And attacks c4, which also could be useful. Like a move like bishop b5 looks very passive, for example. So yeah, we're defending this 3 times. We're defending this twice, so we are holding on to everything. Bishop to d4 is potentially an idea. Maybe. h3 is always a good move to stop knight g4 and give my king some breathing room to avoid back rank ideas later on. I no longer have knight g1 if there is back rank threats as well, because my knight is now on d2, so worth noting. Okay, d5 is surprising. Of course, it defends and puts pressure. Sure. I probably have to push. Knight to g4. Bishop to d4. Not sure what black's doing there. That looks fine. He doesn't, I don't think, have time for him going d4 himself. After bishop takes, bishop g2, king g1, the knight is hanging. Knight g4. Maybe he can go for that? With ideas of bishop to h3 and king and queen to g2. Maybe that's the plan. Here. Take. Maybe that is scary. Maybe that is scary. What else could we do, though? We could go bishop d4 straight away. But then black takes. And I can't take back unless I take the knight, which I don't want to do, because my bishop's really important. So I'm going to push e5 and just live with the consequences. If d4, I suppose I could consider taking on f6. Okay, but he goes for this, which is good. This is not what I was scared of, because here I have bishop d4. I dominate the knight's movement. I'm ready to play h3 and kick the knight away. h3, h4. I don't think that's particularly scary. If take. I probably just have knight to f1 winning the pawn, to be honest. Bishop h6. Queen d2, that's fine. Defending the f4 pawn. This is still an idea. Don't forget about it. I could go knight to f3, defending the h4 square. Now that everything's shut off, and I don't have to worry about e4 anymore. That's not a bad idea. If f6, h3, take, knight h6. That doesn't look good for black. That doesn't look good. h3, h4. What if I move my knight? That doesn't look good, because this is actually quite annoying. And if I go knight f3, there's queen e7 defending. Let's go h3. He might just retreat the knight. He might not go h4. But yeah, he just retreats. Okay, cool. Cool. Knight f3, h4, knight e2. That looks fine. Yeah, this is good. This position is suited to my knights, because I've kept the center firmly shut. As long as these pawns remain intact, and this bishop remains on d4, or I maybe replace it with a knight, then it becomes pretty much impossible for black to open anything up. Maybe rook a8 is the idea, to try to gain control of the a file. I think I probably have to go queen b1 there. Okay, so he takes advantage of my knight moving to play queen to b3, although I'm not really concerned. I'm not particularly concerned. I mean, I have to take. Let's take. If pawn takes, that's great for me. So rook takes is the only logical move. Whoa, what? That can't be good. That can't be good. Okay. As long as I control the A file, it's fine. If he wants to challenge me, he can go ahead. He can go ahead. Bishop. Okay. Alright. Bishop c4 being the idea, I guess. This is very strange play. The knight controlling f7 is very important for black, by the way. I suppose my... Oh, is he threatening... Okay, well, he can't play h4 because my knight controls that square, but my knight does have restricted movement. So I should probably play king g1, so my knight has the f1 square to go to. Or h1 if I really need it. That means that I can now move this knight without fear of h4. That's a cheeky trap. That's a cheeky trap, because knight g5 looks so natural. But h4 and I just lose the knight. That's really interesting. We're also low on time, so we need to make sure we're moving quickly. My opponent has the bishop pair, and I suppose he's going to try and claim that's an advantage, and maybe it is. However, I don't think taking with the pawn was a good idea. I really don't, because now he can't attack the pawn via the b file. That's what I was concerned about. And I was like, well, if he takes with a rook, I can never move this pawn. My rook is tied down to the defense of the pawn. That sucks. Whereas now, that's not the case. Okay, I think I should bring the king a little bit. I'm not sure where... Oh, wait. Oh, bishop to a3 is a potential idea in the future that I have to be concerned about. Because if take, he'll promote. I should probably throw knight d2 in at some point, just to monitor some important squares. But for now, my rook controls a3, so that's fine. This rook can't go after my rook just yet. So that's very useful. Very, very useful. This bishop doesn't really have any movement on this diagonal. We control every single square it wants to go to. I'm reluctant to play knight to g5 because 1, it doesn't do anything, and 2, it encourages h4. If knight d2, h4 could be played, trying to secure access to the f5 square for this knight, so I have to be aware of that. If I go h4, then the knight comes here, which is annoying. Okay, rook c8 looks fine. Maybe preparing this. I should probably play rook to a5. Attacking the bishop. Yeah, and now I control c5. Okay. What do I do here? What do I do? It's a very difficult position. Okay, let's go king e3. Let's get my king. My king might actually make a really good defender of any ideas to get this pawn through. The king on e3 is a very good piece. Let's just ask the bishop where it's going. If it goes to c2, a little bit out the game. Defends the pawn, but... Okay, here knight to e1 makes no sense. Well, maybe it does, actually. If take, I do have king d2. Yeah, that works. Although I obviously allow h4. I do allow h4 there. Okay, this is a very, very tense position. I'm stopping this bishop from coming to c5, which is very useful. Very useful. I could start with king d2, I suppose. Then the bishop has e4. And do I really want to make this trade? I don't think so. Knight e1. If knight f5, I'll happily trade. If knight to e1, pawn to h4, that is what I am concerned about. Because my knight now has to move, and black gets access to f5, which looks like a really nice square. If h4, he gets access to g4. Although maybe that's actually fine. Maybe that's fine. King d2. The knight can't do anything because it is bishop. Maybe that's the idea. Let's go pawn h4. I'm not 100% convinced on it, but I don't want to do nothing. Okay, well, let's take this immediately. That's great. That's great news. Okay, bishop takes. Probably knight g5. Knight g5, bishop e7. Ugh. I could just go pawn g3 and wait. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go pawn g3. So, bishop versus knight. I have to be careful, because if this knight and this bishop get traded, it's a draw. Probably. Probably. This pawn is very good, because the bishop can always go to c2 to defend it, although... I do have ideas of, like, rook b5 and knight d2 to try and win the pawn at the right moment. I also have ideas of rook a7, knight g5 to go after the f7 pawn. And this bishop struggles to defend it because all the black pawns are on light squares. The bishop would have to go all the way to e8 to defend. And there's not a clear path there because it can't go to d3 or b5 to maneuver back. So, okay. I think that we are probably the one in the driver's seat. We dominate the only open file. The b pawn is an asset, but also a weakness. Asset and a weakness. But my opponent has a big time advantage, which should not be understated. That's a strong move. Could go rook b5. Let's play it. Because now there's no rook to a7. And I still stop this. Now I have knight d2. Probably. Could go knight g5, but I don't really accomplish anything. Let's go knight d2. Pressure is always good. The knight wasn't controlling anything important anyway. Knight g5 doesn't do anything anymore. What? What does that do? I don't understand. Don't understand that move at all. I Yeah, I don't get it. Yeah, now we're just up a pawn. Oh, I do have to be careful though. I do have to be careful. Let's bring the knight back to d2. Because if the bishop trades itself with the knight, then opposite colored bishops, right? Whoa, no way. Let's take that. No, this can't work. This cannot work. This cannot work. Because my knight will dominate. Because the position's so tense. All my pawns are on dark squares as well. If black trades the dark squared bishops, which he's doing, like, okay, his bishop can go to f5 and try and protect the weaknesses, but I have a passed b pawn. I have a passed b pawn, which is very important. If take, bishop to f5. I don't want to take yet because being a pawn up in the rook endgame might not be winning. But I'm the only one with chances. I'm up a pawn. I think f6 was the wrong idea. Although, to be fair, the position was very uncomfortable regardless. Of course, I know I could have taken here, but I'm going to go knight f3 anyway, and I don't want to allow the king in like this. That looks dangerous, and black gets counterplay. Doing it like this, though, the bishop's still pinned to the king. So he can't, like, back the bishop up and try to avoid the trade. Even if he did, I'd be fine with that. But now if I take with the knight, I control the f5 square, so there's no entry point. And the knight can't be kicked off of d4 either. I can play moves like rook to b6 to try and assert dominance over the e6 square. You know, that looks pretty nice. This is an excellent position. And the black rook struggles to get involved in the game, really. Maybe it will try to access a7 at some point. I'd love to push the b pawn, but I have to be aware of the weakness of the c pawn. I might have to go king d2. Okay, interesting. I can do this. You can't take because of the fork. I could take, and go for this. I think that makes the most sense. Again, applying pressure to e6. Yeah, we have basically everything on dark squares. I missed that move, but is it that good? Really? You get rid of a weakness, sure. But I can give a check and then win this, no? Yeah, I give a check first. Because if take, then take. To be fair, I maybe have rook b6 there anyway, threatening mate on e6. Although there is bishop to g4 protecting. That doesn't quite work. But now I take here, and yeah, this is game over, surely. I don't see how you defend this, particularly with the weak pawns. I'm 2 pawns up. I have 2 passed pawns. This should be game. I can also bring the king into the position very easily to apply even more pressure. Yeah, let's do that. I know I can play e6, but I don't want to do it prematurely. Let's massage the position a little bit. Make sure we're getting everything we can. Here, then take. Here. 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 Could do this, maybe? Also, there is this I need to be aware of. Is there a quicker win? Yeah, then he just takes. No, let's push e6. Give my king access to the e5 square. Maybe I allowed king to f6, actually. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe that was wrong from me. Probably king f6 makes my life a bit more difficult. Although, to be honest, I can probably just push the b pawn. Something like king f6, just rook to d6. Attacking this. Oh, he actually can't defend that. Because I control this square and I control this square. That's fine, actually. Yeah, let's go rook to d6. Almost resignation time. Bishop to g4, applying pressure. If take, then take. That still doesn't really work, though. Interesting. Let's push b4. If rook to c7, rook to c6, I think. I could go knight c6. Threatening e7. Although, I don't know, I'm not comfortable with that. Check here. This is just easier, isn't it? Rook c6 is just easier. I am giving up a pawn, but... Oh, maybe I shouldn't have given up a pawn. I think it's okay, because all my pawns are on dark squares. So the black king can't really do anything. And the b pawn is a big problem. Yeah, the immediate knight c6 probably is better than rook c6, though. But being up 2 pawns, it should be fine. And the knight, I think, is better than the bishop here. Okay. Doesn't go for it. I think we just push the b pawn. Wait. We could go e7 check. King takes here, here. Take, take. Even this. Yeah, that looks really good. Yeah, let's do it. Pushing the b pawn was also completely valid. But this looks really good. Because we make the king really passive on the g7 square. And then we come here, and my knight is dominating the movement of the bishop. I talk about this relationship between knights and bishops all the time. And typically it's the bishop that is dominating the knight's movement. But in this position, it is the knight that is dominating the bishop's movement. The knight is far more mobile than the bishop here. So that was such an interesting game. I hope you guys enjoyed. This is going to be a very interesting analysis. So let's get straight into it. Well, that is a very interesting game. And we'll go straight into the analysis, because the way I like to play it is to invite my opponent into a Vienna. And I mean, if you look at the evaluation, it will go from plus 0.6 to 0 after bishop c4. And I know that. I know d4 is the best move, but this is what black wants. Black wants this kind of setup, and he's going to know it way better than I am, really. So I'm trying to force him into a Vienna, and a lot of people do actually play e5, particularly if they're not actually trying to go for a g6 setup, which not everyone does. So this is very useful to know, and then you can literally just play it like a normal Vienna position, but one that's actually favorable for white because the bishop isn't on c5. But my opponent goes g6. We go d3. Again, I know d4 is the best move, but I'm not trying to play the main line. Bishop g7, f4, taking space, e6. Here I go bishop b3, because the issue is I want to play a move like knight f3, but I'm concerned about d5. And the computer says, well, just drop the bishop back, de4, de4, queen d1, king d1, and white is better because white has more space. And yeah, that's true. But I don't want to trade the queens like that. I want to keep the queens on the board. And I also don't want to take. Taking is very bad. It's really not good for white, because I lose my strong e4 pawn, and my f pawn doesn't make quite as much sense without the e pawn to partner it. So we drop the bishop back, so that if d5 is played, I'll simply go e5. And after like knight f d7, I can go d4, drop the knight back, go c3. and we turn it into basically a favorable French defense, really. You know, let's imagine castles, knight c to e2, c5, c3. This is really good. Black would have to play the immediate c5, so I don't have time to go c3. And this is still good, though. I mean, like, knight f3, if c4, bishop to a4, like, knight b6 can't be played, luckily. I can trade the bishop off, get castled, drop my knight back, go for c3, and probably still, like, rotate to the king side. This is just very good. So that was the idea. Castles, knight f3, a6, I go a4. The computer wants the immediate e5, and if take, knight to d5, wants knight e4. That's interesting. Huh, okay. Well, I try to keep the position a bit closed. I go a4, c5, and now it's effectively turned itself into a Sicilian defense, like a Grand Prix type attack. So one of the lines that I like to play against the Sicilian is this, and if I just show you one of the main lines, knight c6, d3, a6 is pretty common, f4, b5, knight f3, knight g to e7, castles, something like this. You can see how this position resembles the one we got in the game, especially when my opponent expands on the queen side, right? Like, compare this position with this position. No, not that position. Oh my god. I am getting confused with my lines now. This position... this position with this position, you can see the similarities, right? So queen b6. Now, I did consider the move a5. And after queen c7, I wasn't sure what to do. The computer wants queen to e1, and after knight c6, it wants knight d1 to defend to the pawn like this, but this is a strange way to play the position. I assume knight e3 and f4 is... f5 is the idea, though. I choose king h1, knight c6, knight e2, a very common idea. Queen e1 was also good. Knight to a5, and here you have to preserve the light squared bishop. Queen c7, which the intention is clear. I go knight g3. Again, queen e1 is what the computer wants, and after b5, queen h4, and if take, or let's say bishop d7, like my opponent played. Now f5, and if ef5, bishop g5, and if the knight drops back. Wow, okay, that's very complicated. I, of course, did not see that. I went knight g3 and b5, and here, I played c3, but turns out f5 is playable, which shocks me. ef5, ef5, I thought I didn't have anything. Computer thinks I do. If bishop takes, knight takes, g takes, knight h4, it thinks I'm completely winning, which, to be fair, this does look completely winning. So I probably should have went for f5, but I didn't. I tried to prepare it, and I ran out of time. ab5, ab5, knight h4. Again, I should be going for it, but I went knight h4, which is the wrong idea. c4 comes. Bishop e3 is a mistake. Oh, bishop e1. I didn't even consider this move. That solves this problem and puts my bishop on a good diagonal to support f5. If knight b3, rook a8, rook a8, now I can go bishop e3, although I do allow rook a1, which looks terrifying. Does look a bit terrifying, but okay. Bishop e3, cd3, queen d3, knight c4. Black has an advantage, but it's difficult to prove. I have to take this, really. Rook a1's a mistake. Rook a1, bc4, and queen c2. The computer preferred queen e2. Couldn't really tell you why, to be honest, but it did. Maybe just to keep an eye on c4. Queen c2, though. Rook b8. And here I realize I can't go for this anymore. I've got to drop the knight back, which is the correct move. Queen b7. I go rook a2. The computer wants knight d2. And it wants to trade on b2 and then take on c4, which does make sense in retrospect. But rook a2, bishop c6, knight d2, d5, e5, and here I expected my opponent to go d4. This is what I expected. And I thought, okay, I have to take bishop g2, king g1. This is very scary, but I can maybe survive this. If bishop 2 h3, I have... Whoa, okay. I just go and grab a pawn. And if knight g4, knight e4. This actually looks really good for white. This looks really hard for black to make anything of. But okay, my opponent goes knight g4. Bishop d4 is the only real move. h5, h3. I was expecting h4, but I thought that after take, I can just go for a move like knight f1 and you can't defend this pawn. And if bishop h6, then queen to d2. Or to be fair, even just g5 is very good. And I take, and I'm up a clean pawn. And this bishop isn't all that useful, as we saw in the game, really. So knight h6, knight f3, queen b3, we take. Queen b3 just wasn't a good move. And here, if rook takes, I thought this was a better way for black to go about the position, to be honest. Computer suggests bishop c5, put the knight on d4, I think. Rook b5, bishop e7, rook b8, knight d4, bishop d7, rook a7. And this makes sense. Bishop e8. Okay, that's an interesting move, right? So I suppose, yeah, maybe black does get suffocated, but that's also if I find that line, which to be honest, that's a difficult line. He takes with the c pawn, though, and I thought, oh, well, we're in business now. We're in business. Bishop b5. King g1 is the best move, because I want to move this knight, but if I do, then I get hit with h4. I do have knight gf1, which is actually defended, to be fair, which I did miss, but it's still bad. It's still bad. So, king g1, bishop f8, king f2. It's really good for me to bring my king into the game like this. Rook c8, rook to a5. I don't want to allow bishop to c5, because I like my bishop. This is interesting, because the computer's favorite move is king e1. I was concerned, however, about this. Although in this line, it apparently doesn't work because of the pin. That's true. That's actually very true. But okay. Rook a5, bishop d3, king e3, kicking the bishop. h4 is a mistake, apparently. The computer preferred rook to a7. And if bishop c5, rook c5, king d2, rook c4, knight e2, and if knight to f5, apparently I have g4. I also have access to g5, so there's that. Very difficult to evaluate, though. I choose h4, but knight f5 is definitely a mistake. I have to take it, of course. Bishop takes, and I go g3 because I just want to shore up the position. I considered rook to b5. I rejected it because of rook to... Well, first this, and then knight... No, not there. Knight d2. I was concerned about rook a8. The computer doesn't think I had anything to worry about. I can just move the knight, and if rook a1, I counterattack. King g7, rook b7. What? And if the rook invades, I just have king f2, rook here, knight f3. Oh, okay, yeah. But it's difficult to evaluate that. It looks like black has counterplay. So I go g3, just play a solid move, see what my opponent wants to do. He goes rook c7. And this makes my decision very, very easy, because now he can't infiltrate on the A file. So I go rook b5, bishop c2, go for the exact same line, except it's easier, because there's no rook a8. Bishop e7, I just win a pawn, drop my knight back. I preferred knight to a5, but is that... I can't really explain that, to be honest. Knight d2, f6, which I thought was just a bad move. I mean, to be fair, black is completely lost, because I will just push the b-pawn if he does nothing. Probably trade rooks at some point if I can. E takes, bishop takes, and knight f3 is the best move. Bishop d1 was an interesting idea, trying to... what's he trying to do? Like, if knight to e5, for example, I did consider this move. You can't take because I'll fork the rook and the king. But let's say the rook moves, and let's say I make a move like b4, I was a little bit concerned this might be drawn. The computer doesn't think so, but like probably because there's rook still on the board. But I don't want to risk a draw, basically, because of opposite colored bishop. So I take knight d4 is an inaccuracy. Knight e5 is better. Why? Why is this better? Bishop c2. King d4. Let's just say black shuffles. Oh, I stopped rook c4. And then I push. Huh. Okay, well, knight d4 is still good, though. Still good. e5 is a mistake, though. I thought for the life of me my opponent would play bishop g4. I thought this was far more resilient. I'm still winning, but, like, it's more resilient for sure. And I've got to be a little bit careful with how I go about this position. But e5 makes my life easy. Now, I could take and go rook b6, threatening mate. If this, then I have a check. So, you know, this. But I expected bishop g4. Oh, I can just take on g6, actually. I missed that. I missed that idea. I even have knight c6. King d6. Oh, no, that's just a repetition. So that doesn't help me. Okay, well, I go rook b6, force the king back, take on e5, rook e7. Here, I considered many moves. Many moves. Rook f6, king g7, knight e6, king h7, king d4. That looks pretty convincing. To be fair, I could even maybe go for this and bring the king like this. That looks pretty promising. But I chose to go king f4, king g7. Here, I saw an idea of going knight e6 check, king f7, knight check, king back. And what was my idea? Now playing e6. I did see this, and I thought this was quite promising. Although that's similar to what I went for in the game. No, rook f6, I think, is what I came up with. But it's not even that good, to be fair. I chose e6, though. King f6. I thought, oh, I've let the king back into the game. I shouldn't have done that. I do have rook d6, though. Rook b7, b4, rook c7. Here, I apparently can just take and allow this because of rook d7. And I'm again threatening mate, which you actually can't stop, really. Because g5, I take, and you're still probably getting mated. And the only other way is to sack the rook. Because otherwise rook f7 comes. But okay, I went rook c6, offering a trade. In retrospect, I liked the move knight c6. The computer... Yeah, I think I didn't like it because of this. However, b5? I was going to play d7... Sorry, e7 check. Then king f7... Rook f... Whoa, what a move. What a move. Yeah, that's quite nice. But alright, I went rook c6, rook g7, and e7 I thought was the easiest way to convert this because I forced a trade of the rooks. You can't defend this pawn, and my opponent resigns in this position. I hope you guys enjoyed this game. This is a very interesting game. Effectively turning a Pirc defense into a Sicilian, which I much prefer to do. If you want to see the previous episodes of the speedrun, the playlist is down here. And if you want to see another game where... If it was actually a tournament game where my opponent tried to play the Pirc against me, and I effectively turned it into a Sicilian. Awesome game, by the way. Check out the video up here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in one of those.